Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the death of Pete Hamill. Pete Hamill, as some of you may have heard of, he was I guess you could say, a legendary writer and editor. He was an editor for the Daily News and New York Post. I don't know if he wrote for them or not, but I believe in all likelihood he wrote for at least one of those papers. I know he was an author. I believe he published some books. You're talking about a very illustrious career, and he had died. He had died on this day on June 24th. There was a report he had previously in recent time. He had fallen. There was a fall, and he had fractured something. He fractured a hip at the time, and he died died after about like 4 days later. There was a report that his kidney, at least one kidney, or in his heart, had given out, and terrible what has happened. But he lived a good life. Pretty long life. 85 years old. I don't have his time of birth, of course, but I had to improvise and do a solar/sunrise chart. It's an impromptu delineation of his chart. And yeah, according to Wikipedia, he was born on June 24th, 1935. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, and he has a Cancer Sun, Aries Moon, and I'm going to talk about some natal placements, and also some transits that may be tied in with this sad passing. So anyway, well, first of all, having the Sun in Cancer, of course, is basic nature, basic character, likely one that's very sentimental and sympathetic, and one that I would say could be very tenacious, show unequivocal love toward whatever he did. It's interesting because having a Cancer Sun could make his basic character very introverted, and he has an Aries Moon, which is very, obviously there's a strong disparity between his unconscious energy, his conscious energy, because the Moon in Aries is really, more, at least on a conscious level, more combative and fiery, where the Sun in Cancer is really more about really avoiding confrontation, and often seeking their home as their sanctuary to avoid harshness. But he's somebody that the Moon in Aries likely had a lot more courage, more fortitude than the typical Cancerian Sun, and more confrontational. Because he did write, I believe, about corruption, and he was very, this shows me, having his Mercury is in Gemini, which tells me that he was likely a very verbose and eloquent writer, had ability to understand manifold subjects, likely had a very versatile and quick mind. And having Chiron in Gemini, somebody that could be a healer through his writing and his journalism. In the solar sunrise chart, the ruler of the third house in the first house, it can be an indicator of somebody that likes to communicate and shows that communicative ability on a first impression, may not be at a loss for words, very valuable. Having the Mercury in Gemini, of course, could reaffirm this energy. And you're talking also too, as far as some natal placements, he has Mars in Libra, which could, of course, give some physical issues with the kidneys. It's also one of the 6th house rulers in the solar sunrise chart, because Scorpio falls on the 6th house cusp in the solar sunrise chart, and that ruler is Mars in Libra. The transit that stands out to me is the fact that transit Pluto was very close proximity to his north node in Capricorn. North node is at 22 degrees Capricorn, a critical degree. When you have the north node is involved in a transit, it could often indicate issues one may have to address and confront. And when transit Pluto is near your north node, that could be issues connected with death and crisis related issues. Now, also, he did have, I believe it was the right hip that was fractured. And it was a hip that was fractured. Transit Jupiter was not far from his north node. Jupiter can be associated with the hips. It's the ruler of Sagittarius. He also had transit south node in Sagittarius in the sixth house of health at this time. And when you're talking about, South Node can be to one's detriment. It's in transiting the sixth house in the solar sunrise chart, and of course Sagittarius can be associated with the hips. Transit North Node in Gemini is not far from his Sun in Cancer. When you're talking about again, going back to the North Node being involved in transit, it can be about issues one may have to address or confront. The transit North Node being close to his Sun can be an indicator of issues with the physical body one may have to address or confront. And Gemini can be about mobility. You're talking about the North Node being in Gemini. Transit North Node in Gemini also not far from his Mercury in Gemini, and Mercury can be about mobility. It wouldn't surprise me if he was having, you're talking about Mercury in Gemini and the transit North Node being close to it. There may have been some asthma or breathing issues going on, or something with the lungs or the arms, the hands, the shoulders, the nerves. I would not surprise me at all if this was something that was transpiring at this time. Also, at this time, he had transit Venus not far from his natal Mercury in Gemini. So this was a time where many were going to show that they were really enamored with this very eloquent and verbose writing, but sadly it had to be on very adverse circumstances due to his passing. We're talking also. Another thing I noticed too in his chart, he also had the transit Sun at the time not far from his natal Venus at this time. And the rule of the Venus as far as the solar sunrise chart is the ruler of the 12th house. He's got Taurus on the 12th house cusp. The ruler of that is Venus. The 12th house can be about endings and sorrow, well, secret sorrows, but I think it could also be about general sorrows as well. The transit Sun hitting that ruler could be putting some spotlight on it. Also, he did, when he passed, his heart had given out. The Sun can also be connected with the heart, and we're going, and being in Leo is the sign of the heart. Venus in Leo by itself can be an indicator of heart-related issues. I have my natal Venus in Leo. What's interesting, ironically enough, based on the solar sunrise chart, he has Venus in Leo at 17 degrees, which is, I have that at the 17 degrees as well. So the thing about this too is, it's just terrible, but he's got right now we're at transit Uranus in Taurus. He has Uranus in Taurus in his natal chart. He's going through the Uranus return. The good thing about the fact, when you're going through your Uranus return, that means you lived like 84 years. He was 85 when he passed away. You had that transit going through all 12 of your houses, which means that you were able to experience a number of unique and unusual things, or maybe even innovative things, and in one's life. And it shows when, that's basically symbolic of living a very full life. And it's terrible that this actually, had transpired. He's got Pluto in Cancer natally. Now, I understand Pluto is a generational planet, but Pluto in Cancer natally can sometimes be an indicator of passing away in one's home. And one of the ruler of is, in the solar sunrise chart, he has Virgo on the cusp of the 4th house, and that ruler, that Mercury, is conjunct the sun, so it's not surprising this was some physical related issue was going to transpire at his end, at that end part of his life. Now, another thing I'm looking at too is that the ruler of his eighth house, which is Saturn, is very close to his tenth house cusp. Now, that's not to me. I mean, that shows that that's an indicator that one's death is going to be one that could get some notoriety and exposure and recognition. Now, he also, interestingly enough, he has Saturn in Pisces, and I mean that tells me that there was a lot. It could have been a lot of when the work that he did may have involved a lot of self-sacrificing energy, altruism, and he may have. I don't think he did anything as far as career related that would be Pisces related, like for example, like photography or dancing or chemistry or oceanography or anything like that. But I think the way it may have manifested with him was that he put a lot of self-sacrificing energy in his career, a lot of altruism, I would say, and a lot of compassion. And the thing is really not much more to as far as talking about any the transits in his chart and his passing. It's just terrible that something like this were to transpire. And also, I mean, the only other thing I'm seeing is that the transit Saturn, you could say, is making a long, perhaps a loose inconjunct to his natal sun in Cancer. And when you're talking about inconjuncts in astrology, they can be about health-related issues. Saturn being in Capricorn, there may have been some issues that were going on, perhaps with his bones. I mean, being 85 years old, he likely was going through some, bone deterioration at this time, and weakness, or something with the skin, the teeth, or the joints at this time. So really not much more um, as far as anything else. It's related in terms of looking at his chart, and as far as transits and natal placements connected with this death. I just want to close with stating that I offer my condolences and prayers to the friends and family members of Pete Hamill. Obviously, somebody, had an illustrious career, again, a legendary, revered writer, and doing it, and an editor, and doing this work in what could arguably be the hardest city to do it in New York, and doing it for very prolific newspapers, the New York Daily News and New York Post. Rest in peace, Pete Hamill. Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.